Hi, I'm Cindi McGee, and you're watching Polymer Clay TV. Today's Leafy layer veneer is inspired by this fabric that I found online. The first step was to prepare the 4 colors of clay that I chose to mimic the colors in the fabric. And to do that, I'm grating the clay. I find it easiest to freeze the clay first, and then you just rub it along the side of your cheese grater. You do want to be careful when you do this because it's very easy to catch your fingers in it, which is not fun. When your clay defrosts and becomes soft again, it's best to refreeze it before trying to continue to grate it. It just makes it a lot easier when it's frozen. I discovered an easy way to clean that clay out of the grater so that it's ready for next time. I just use my blade and I can scrape out any that's inside, but to get it off the outside, I'm using a wire brush. This is an old one that I snatched from my husband's workshop, but it's perfect for removing that clay from the surface. For the base layer, I conditioned and rolled some Primo Sculpey translucent, this is white translucent, to a setting number 5 on my pasta machine. Then it was time to apply the color. I just sprinkled randomly over the surface of that translucent clay sheet all of the colors until I had covered the surface. Once that base layer is completely covered in clay, the next step is to place some parchment paper over the surface, and I use my hands to start pressing, and then I'm using my clay roller. And you want to be careful doing this. You don't want to push it away and smudge it, for lack of a better word. You just want to flatten it so that all of those little particles become compressed together to create a sheet. The next step is to silkscreen. I'm using this tooled leather silkscreen from Create Along. You can use any pattern that you really would like. I place it orange side down onto the clay sheet, and I like to give it a little rub just to make sure it's going to stay in place. And then I'm silkscreening with some linen. This is just an off-white shade of acrylic paint. Once you've covered the whole surface, go ahead and wash your silkscreen right away so that it's ready for use next time. Once the silkscreened image was dry, it was time to add the next layer, and I'm using this Champagne Ice metallic luster from DecoArt. And I'm just going to put a very light layer over the surface that's been silkscreened. You don't want to rub real hard and remove that paint. You just want to soften it a bit, give it a little bit of sheen. And a little tip I've discovered is if your metallic lusters get dry, if you dab a little bit of water, they'll become workable again. Now, when I got to this step, I discovered that I really liked this veneer just as it was, but I did still want to try to mimic that leafy pattern that was on the inspiration fabric. For the base layer for the leafy veneer, I conditioned and rolled some Primo Sculpey pearl to a setting number 5 on my clay machine to create a sheet. To create the thin stems for the leaf branches, I just used my clay blade and cut very thin strips from the veneer. To make the leaves, I have this really tiny leaf cutter that I'm using. If you don't have one of these, you could use a craft knife to cut leaf shapes. Using the inspiration fabric as my guide, I began to construct my leafy branches on that clay base sheet. I started by applying my stems and then went ahead and added the leaves to accent. After I had that sheet completely covered, I did place that parchment paper back over it and just used my hands to very gently press and make sure that all those elements were adhered to that base sheet. Overall, I was pretty pleased with the result. It really does sort of mimic that original inspiration fabric. Then it was time to have some fun creating some projects with my veneers. I decided to use the leafy veneer and some of the original veneer together to create some unique pendants. I ended up with a lot of scrap after I was done making the pendants, so I compressed them into a cube, and then I used my clay blade to cut some really thin slices from it. I used a sheet of pearl clay as the base. This is rolled to a number 1, and then I placed those slices over it. Then I pressed some parchment paper over the top and used my roller to flatten and smooth out all of those pieces. So I basically ended up with 3 different veneers from my original veneer. This last veneer looks especially nice when you add a bit of resin. It really makes those different colors, and that touch of translucent makes it dimensional, and it really pops. Here are all the finished pieces that I made with my 3 veneers. I think they would also be fun veneers for polymer trading coins. Need more inspiration? We invite you to join our Polymer Clay Tribe Facebook page. Over 16,000 members sharing inspiring projects every day. For lots more creative polymer clay ideas, visit the Polymer Clay TV blog.